You are listening to the Practicing the Art of Small Business podcast with Shannyn Merlo and Julie Parker. Enjoy this conversation about business, leadership, and the self-awareness journey to great success.
Welcome, Julie, and welcome, listeners, to Practicing the Art of Small Business. Hello, Julie.
Hello, Shannyn. Love to see you.
Always such a pleasure. It's been so long since we started chatting.
That's right. Well, we started this little session a long time ago. We've covered all sorts of bases and we thought, quick, we've got to get a recording in.
We should probably do a recording. Well, I probably need to do a couple of caveats before we kick off. First caveat is Julie is in her daughter-in-law, sister-in-law? Stepdaughter's house, and this is the one with the bird. So if you hear screeching, Julie is not committing a crime. There is a bird in the background and there's also a dog in the background. And also it turns out I've got some sort of yawning ailment at the moment, and I have been doing a little bit of yawning. And
she assures me it's not because she's bored with me.
when Julie mentioned the topic, I did actually openly yawn. So, this one could be a fun one, kids. Stay on for the ride.
Let's hope we make it more exciting than how I described it to her just a few minutes ago.
Would you like a second go, Julie?
I would like a second go.
The floor is yours, my dear. Please tell us, what are we talking about today?
Do I have an exciting topic for us today? Get prepared. Take a deep breath, everyone, and prick the listening ears up. I'm talking about when you're running a business, a small business, and you've got a collection of people and they seem to be pretty happy, and then you overhear them talking to each other about their wages and you think, oh, now I'm in strife that you'll get paid differently and do the same job. This topic is all about the discomfort that some business owners have around their team members sharing details about their wages. I've seen some instances where they put a ban on those sort of discussions. And is it actually indeed a bad thing? And how can we make it a good thing and not a threat to team harmony and the business owner's sense of space?
I mean, can we take a little sidebar to start off with?
Yeah.
Do you think a business owner can actually ban discussions in the workplace?
No, they actually can't ban those sort of discussions. I did a bit of research around this just recently, which is why this has come up as a topic today. And in most countries, it is illegal to actually ban your employees from sharing details around their wages, and it actually stems from the clarity that is required to ensure that there is no racism or sexism going on in the workplace.
Right.
And it's being reflected in their wages.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Well, good to know. Good to know. Obviously, there's certain topics you can ban, but not this.
Not wages.
Not wages.
And let's face it, you can ban it all you like. It's like banning your children from ever smoking. They're going to try it anyway. It's just human nature. And so I think it is a foolish path to go down. And if anything, it puts you in a vulnerable position as a leader and the way your team members perceive you. And because it looks like you're trying to hide something. If you say no discussions about that, that is banned. So one, it's illegal. Two, it doesn't really look good from the team member's perspective. It looks like you're trying to hide something or that you're fearing some sort of information coming out. But with my work around this, and as you know, I've got the staff remuneration matrix that I developed with Charles a number of years ago. And I think there is a way forward for teams, working teams, and so you never have to fear people talking about their wages. In fact, you can embrace those discussions because of the structure that you're supplying with, but that's coming on down the track. I'd like to come back to all the reasons why you think bosses can be unhappy with their team members discussing wages.
Why do I think bosses can be unhappy?
Throw a reason at me.
I think it really centres in an uncomfortableness because they have created an unfair pay structure. Because if you've got nothing to hide, then why wouldn't you? And they might say, well, it's personal and people don't need to be discussing who's on what wage. Totally fine. That's fair enough. You don't necessarily want to expose differences in, I don't know, it sometimes is a bit of an uncomfortable conversation. But if you inherently can't back up the reason why someone who might be on a very similar role is on a very different wage, then there's a lot of mistrust there that can be created. And I think if you as a leader are uncomfortable about that because there's a disparity, then inherent in that is a, I don't know, a word that I can't find.
But you're right, Shannyn, because what is one way that business owners manage what to pay people? And it's haphazard. It's reactionary, isn't it? This is what the last person in that role was paid, so this is what you're going to be working on. And then that person says, I want a pay rise. And then oh, gosh, I have to give them a pay rise because I don't want to lose them. And so, you get paid a bit more, but don't tell the others because I can't afford to pay everyone that higher wage. And so with that sort of situation at play, you can see why business owners would get to a point where everyone is being paid at quite different rates and they don't have, in quotation marks, a good reason why, because a good reason to tell one team member isn't because you never put your hand up and asked for it.
Absolutely. I'm trying to, if my face looks confused, I'm trying to find our episode that we did on bonus discussions because I think that's a good one to talk about because I was going to come in with a little story of a client of mine who we've had many conversations about how they pay bonuses because they're not paid on performance. They're paid on an arbitrary scale of what the business owner feels at this particular time. Here we go. We've got it's episode 8, really early, Julie. I wonder how we were back then. How do you determine how much to pay your staff was what we talked about in that one.
And that may have been also when I spoke a bit more about the JPPS staff remuneration matrix.
Yes, it would have been.
Possibly.
Or it was in episode 27, which was about performance reviews. So check out those 2 episodes in conjunction to this particular one. But this client of mine has a sort of a bucket that they tend to pay in bonuses, and that tends to be a percentage of wage because it's an arbitrary bonus. The reason we've had discussions is I've always claimed that they should be performance-based, people who are exceeding their performances. But sometimes it'll be that person has really been annoying me and I don't want to pay them the extra bonus.
What does that scale look like? This is, on the scale of 1 to 10, this is how annoying you've been to me. I've put you right here.
No, a little bit. So, like, performance-wise, you've just delivered on your job and actually you've been a bit of a pain in the butt to me over the year. So I don't want to pay you a bonus. But then this person exceeded on performance, has been a really great team player, has taken the load off me. And so, yes, it does say that person does deserve it more than the other person. But I think within that conversation, how would you tell the person who barely gets the bonus that you didn't get much of a bonus because you annoyed me?
Well, I think you can actually put those things in adequate terms, professional terms within the framework, because this is the gateway to making sure that discussions around wage amongst your team members is okay, if not encouraged. Because if you've got a fair structure where everyone is paid from that same structure, then everyone clearly understands why one person is paid differently to another and what I individually need to do in order to increase my wage. And so when we say that you're being annoying, when you get back down to the nuts and bolts of what does annoying mean to that person, for example, in the staff remuneration matrix, a couple of the elements are, do you create more work for me or do you manage yourself? Are you more self-managed? Do you train other team members so I get a higher return on my investment with other team members? Or are you not interested in training other people? Do you come to me with problems only, or do you come to me with solutions as well? And so the elements that are possibly annoying to the employer, when you go, why are they annoying? You could possibly come back down to a characteristic of employment and have that as part of your structure.
I love that. That remuneration matrix is absolute gold. Do you have that as a free downloadable?
I've been told off many times that that it used to be a free downloadable. It's not a free downloadable anymore.
It shouldn't be. Because
it is. The people that have access to that now are my club members. But recently I've been talking about having it be quite a separate product, because I'm thrilled that you like it, and a lot of people that do look at it love it. I love it. And it took a while to get together, but I keep coming back to it going, that's what makes it fair. Because the way, just to give all the audience a bit of a very quick framework around it, my business is with dental practices, and most staff within a dental practice, putting the dentist to the side, but all the nurses, receptionists, practice managers, etc., there is a minimum wage. Most places do have a minimum wage for a particular role. And then you start off with that, and then you get people on a point system for additional things such as level of professionalism and turning up on time and reliable and complete all of their tasks and help team members complete their tasks. And, they're not the first out the door. They're asking other people what to do and, what I can do to help you. And all of these additional things, do they help train other team members up? Are they self-managed, or do they require a lot of management? All these other elements, they were on a point system. And we come from the premise of, if you had the ideal person in that role, someone that you can't imagine anyone better in that role, what would you pay them per hour? Mm-hmm. And so that's what helps determine what each of those points, what the additional points are worth. And so sometimes people will have the additional points worth 10 cents, sometimes 25 cents, sometimes 30 cents. And so once you've got your value attached to the additional points, then you open it up to everybody else and you say, okay, we're going to have one-on-one meetings with everybody. You have a group meeting to tell everyone how we're going to be paying people from now on. And you have a one-on-one meeting with everybody. And you can do this once every 6 months, once every year, whatever you want to do. And because the once every 6 months is always a good idea. So if people are wanting to earn more, they can get on track halfway through the year if they're not on track yet, sort of thing. So it's more of a performance review at that space. But then every year, because every year of employment is worth 1 point, and I've always maintained that loyalty is worth something, even if they're just stock standard, don't learn anything new, don't train anybody else. Just the fact that they've been there for another year, that's worth something, and you keep all their brains trust, within your organisation, all their knowledge within the organisation. And so every year they're going to get something for that additional year, but they may not be achieving mastery in how they get certain things done, and they may be falling down in terms of being more difficult to manage this past year because you have had a lot of issues or whatever the thing is, quite a lot of training or whatever the thing is. But when you've got it within that structure and everyone is presented with the same structure and dealt with in the same way, that's a level playing field. And when it's a level playing field, everyone feels like they're fairly managed.
And I wonder whether could people, obviously you've got this amazing resource, but if you wanted to make it up yourself, you could almost do it. I remember many years ago I did a decision matrix for myself. I needed to make a decision. It was a personal decision. So now that I've made that laugh, it sounds like it was a dubious decision. So now I've got to reveal what the decision was. So let's go back in the archives. Everyone gather round. Auntie Shannon's going to tell you a story from her life. So I had been living overseas for a couple of years, and on my way back to coming to Australia, one of my parents passed away very suddenly. And I was going, when I say on the way back, I was going to travel for a couple of months, sort out my life, decide what the next phase of my life is going to be after living away for a couple of years. But 4 days in, my mum passed away and I was back in Australia trying to figure out life. And anyway, so I ended up very, very, very gratefully living with my sister, and forever grateful for that, being able to land somewhere and sit in my pajamas for a month, basically shell-shocked. As I went on the journey, I was sort of like, should I move out from my sisters? There are benefits, but there's also costs. And I couldn't get my head around my different choices, because there was stay with my sister, cost benefit, do a share situation, cost benefit, move out on my own, cost benefit, and other alternatives. But there was so many choice in here. And so I created a decision matrix to just try and logically work out what was important to me. So in that, I wrote down my 3 options up the top. I'm just kind of talking through a decision-making matrix. I'm hoping it's going to add value to how would you do this.
Absolutely will. Yeah.
So I put my 3 options up the top, like stay, sister, rent, whatever. And then down the side was my criteria of things that were really important to me, like closeness to work, cost of living, freedom and flexibility, blah, 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 blah. So all these things that were important to me was down on the left-hand side. And then, so column A in my Excel spreadsheet, and then column B, I actually put a weighting on things, because as with anything, some things are weighted more important than other things. So then when I then did a comparison against the 3 things, they were weighted. And so at the end, I was able to say, let's say it was closeness to work, because my sister lived quite far out and I did want to be closer to work. I wanted to be closer for social activities and things like that. So my sister would get like a 0, and the living with friends in a certain location might have got a 1, and choosing my own adventure might have got a 2. But then there was an ultimate score, which was then weighted against that. And at the end, I was able to get a number which showed me which option was actually the best option based on my criteria.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
So I think that with that in mind, if people are looking to come up with their own way of how do we drive performance that's not just KPIs, that's not just turning up and performance-based. It's performance-based, but it's also behaviourally based and culturally based. What does that look like? You can actually brainstorm through what's important in your business and actually how important, and do a weighting against that, and then put your point system to that. What are your thoughts on my made-up way of doing things, Julie?
I think it's fantastic, because it takes the spontaneity and reactionary response away from making these big decisions for our workplaces. And even though for a boss, quite often wages, these people that need so much management, and they're one of my biggest, inverted commas, costs to the business. And so it's easy to start seeing them as a cost rather than as a benefit to the business and an investment into the business as well. And so sometimes when money is tight, or we've lost a big client or whatever, and someone comes and says they'd like a pay rise, it's just stressful for them. But when you do put proper thought behind it, align it with your values, have everyone be very aware of what an ideal employee looks like in this organisation, with this particular manager, with this particular boss, and have that boss actually contemplate and move through the motions of articulating that and being able to communicate that really effectively, it just brings everybody onto the same page. Because I think normally the thoughts that the boss and manager have, the thoughts that the boss have around wages, performance, team management, the thoughts that a manager has and the thoughts that the employees have are all wildly different. They're all involved in the same relationship. It's like a parent and a child. They have completely different thought processes around jobs and duties and chores and school and behaviour in the house. But we all must get along together. And it's when we share our thoughts and feelings, and we share what directs our thoughts and decisions around this, for the kids to fully appreciate, that's why mum wants me to do this or dad tells me to do that. And when the parents find out more about the kids, that's why they've got a bit of an attitude at the moment. More information is greater clarity, and with greater clarity, we can manage a situation better.
Oh, well, I mean, surely clarity makes everything better.
Because I think if you asked employees in different organisations, what do you need to do to get a pay rise? I think their answers could be quite, I don't know, from I don't know to I absolutely do know, because we've got this very firm structure in place and I know the dollar amount that I could improve on if I did this particular course or did this particular thing. But I think in most organisations, sorry, not most, I'm going to rephrase that. I think in some organisations, they would either not know or they'd say something like, I do all sorts of things, but I've never got a pay rise from it.
Yep. I would agree. I've actually got a consulting client. They've got a pretty good way of determining wage. So they have a criteria that team members need to earn 2.5 to 3 times their salary. That's kind of where they're at, and over a certain period of time. And what that means is it's all about efficiency, how quickly they get work done, what level they're at in terms of their chargeability from a consulting perspective. And then when they're consistently doing 3 times or more than 3 times, they get a pay rise. Because what then happens is they then drop down to only being 2.5 times their salary.
Yeah.
Now, it's sort of like, but hang on, that doesn't work. But actually, if they increase their value to the company, they get charged out at a higher rate. They then, if they do more work more efficiently, they're getting through more work. So therefore, they're actually increasing it every time, because the business is then, it's really obvious. Our metric of success is sort of once you hit 3 times your salary, we give you another pay rise. So it makes it really easy to say your return to our business is this.
Yeah.
Which I quite like. It makes it an easy conversation to say it's very performance-based.
Yeah, and with certain employees, I think that would work beautifully, absolutely beautifully. There are some where they might be working on the checkouts or their front, the front.
Very different.
But even there's space for movement, because all you have to do as a business owner is ask yourself, if you had someone that was just scraping by not getting fired, on one hand, and then on the other hand, you had somebody that you hope to God stays with you forever because they are so delightful. They're so terrific at customer service, communications. They end up saving you on problems. They're fixing things so you don't have to worry about them with clients as well. They're an absolute superstar. You're not going to pay them the same rate. You're going to have one at the low end, one at the high end, and that's your range. That's what you've got to work within. And people will come and start working with you somewhere within that range. And so it's just about identifying what particular characteristics of the person fulfilling that role would bring them closer to the high end, and then creating a matrix around that.
When you opened up, Julie, and we might have covered it off through the conversation, but maybe not as directly as what might be helpful for some. When we started off, you said something about bad discussions and good discussions in the workplace in regard to wage. Your face looks a little bit terrified.
No, I'm just trying to remember what I said.
That's what I mean. Your face is like, you are throwing me under the bus, Shannyn. Shannyn, what about this partnership, Shannyn? You can cut this out if you would prefer.
No. I can certainly relate that there's good and bad discussions, and maybe this is what I was meaning. If you don't have a great structure in place, if you know you have started paying people in a way that you are uncomfortable with them sharing those details because you don't have anything to justify the differences, then those sort of discussions amongst your staff members is unhelpful. Not, you can't stop them. You can't ban them. And don't think that it's reasonable to think that just because I've banned it, they're not having those discussions. But they're unhelpful because it can trigger that sense of unfairness within teams. And teams need to work in a fair environment. That's part of what makes the environment good for them. But then once you've got a firm structure in place, a fair framework in place, then you embrace those discussions because the discussions look different. rather than why do you get paid more than I do? It's around you get paid more than I do because of those 3 points. And so I've got to get you to coach me a little bit on how you do that so then I can get paid that higher amount too. I know what I need to do now to get a higher wage. And so this is the discussion I'm having with people around me. How do you think I can do that?
They're much better and healthier and gooder discussions.
Yeah. And you'd overhear them and you wouldn't be phased in the slightest. You'd be happy that they were happening because what the discussions are about are people understanding how or understanding what good performance looks like and how I can get there.
And I liked how you said, I can see that you're performing better in these areas. Can you coach me? That's a much more above the line way of communicating than I deserve more money. Give it to me.
Yeah, that's right. And I think too, because if you haven't got any structure around it and no one knows what to do to get a pay rise, then where else can many people go to other than, I just want a pay rise? Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And one additional thing I'll quickly throw in as well, and I forgot to mention this before, when we're talking about you can't ban the discussions around this, and if you've got a great structure in place, they then can be very good discussions to have. We always need to keep in mind as well, and sometimes it's a good thing to, when you're doing a performance review, to include this question in the performance review every now and again. Are you being pressured into sharing details about your wage by other people? Because we really need to make sure that, yes, you can share details if you're free and willing to share those details. But if people are asking you, despite the fact that you've not been giving up that information freely, you don't need to either. It's not a condition of employment that you share this information. You are allowed to keep this private and have all the team members understand that is private information. You're allowed to discuss it, but people are allowed to their sense of privacy around that as well.
It is interesting you say that, because I wonder what cultural norms would make that in any way an acceptable conversation to have.
And this is where I think it's a generational thing. Back in my day, you never, ever shared what you were being paid at all. I never knew, for example, what my father was being paid or anything like that. But I think the younger generations are far more free in discussing those sort of things. They don't have those natural barriers around that sort of discussion as a general, very, very general rule.
The youth, Julie. To be the youth.
To be able to discuss anything.
But I do think I'm kind of going back to my employed roles. Maybe it's the freedom of the youth, but I would think that if someone was talking about it, that they're unhappy with what they're getting paid.
Correct.
And they're looking for comparison. And I think that maybe as a workplace, the role for the leader is if you're not comfortable sharing that, ask them to come to me and let's have a discussion around what their wage is, whether it's fair and reasonable, how they can get more money, because that conversation is only going to come up because they're not happy with what they're getting paid.
I love that question being involved in feedback sessions between employee and employer as well. All these things that are traditional, like, I would never ask that. I'd be bringing on problems onto my plate. But if someone's unhappy with what they're being paid, you want to know about it. Otherwise, they end up leaving. You're like, why'd they leave? And so I think sometimes we fear, if I ask my employees as one of those many questions, are you happy working here? Is there anything else that we can do to improve your experience here, you improve your training, all the things, that are you happy with what you're being paid? Because I believe that people are afraid to ask that question because they think the employers will always like take advantage of the question and say, I want more money. It's never been my experience of that.
Oh,
people,
really?
when that question is asked of employees that I had, they would say if they were concerned, but most of the time they'd say, no, I am happy with things.
Okay, that's interesting. I think if you were concerned that people would say, no, I'm not, if you have a framework to back up your decisions, then that's going to be a way more comfortable conversation of like, okay, fair point. Let's have a discussion around what your role looks like, what your responsibilities in your role is, what our matrix is. Let's plug it all in there and just make sure that you're actually being paid fairly for your roles and your behaviour in this business.
Because again, I think if they were to say, take advantage of that question and say, no, I want to be paid more, it possibly comes back to that lack of understanding of what actually makes up their wage in the first place.
Yeah. Fair points. Fair points. So, Julie, should we post our annual revenue on our podcast? Probably not.
That's hilarious.
Is there anything that we've missed in this little potty? It's a short one, short and sharp and to the point.
Short and sharp. No, I think that's good. I think it's good. Be aware of, as business owners, just be aware, why don't you want that thing being discussed? And just think to yourself, how much of that would be alleviated and not be a problem if we had a fair structure in place that everyone fully understood? I think most concerns would be answered by that. And then it becomes something that is, discussion around it is encouraged because it helps us all move forward.
And obviously, if you're a dental practice and you would like access to Julie's matrix, you can get in touch with her because she does have a program to support that conversation. Would you take on a referral from my peeps, Julie?
Absolutely. That matrix can be adjusted and customised to different industries and roles within any organisation.
Fantastic. And so we didn't start out this as a plug, but I do. If you've seen The Matrix, I mean, you've heard of it, but if you've seen
The Matrix, I love it.
If you've seen The Matrix, now is the time to take the blue pill or the red pill.
Me and Keanu Reeves, we put it all together.
And Julie has definitely taken the red pill. So definitely get in touch with her because I think it is a brilliant, brilliant way of making fairness in the organisation. I think because it's a short episode, we don't need a wrap. Make sure it's, hang on, I'm about to do one. Make sure if you're uncomfortable in having a conversation about how much people get paid in your organisation, make sure that you have a framework that is fair and reasonable that you can refer back to. Julie has one. A good discussion is actually one that's rooted in how can I improve, and you've got a framework in how someone can improve. And certainly don't tell your team members that they can't talk about it because you're not supposed to. And that's it. That's my wrap. It's pretty boring today.
Well, I do encourage people to go down this path because once you've got it organised, it ends up being your saviour as an employer. If anyone comes to you and say, I want a pay rise, you go, fantastic, let's get in there. Let's get our matrix out and figure out what you can do to get one.
I love the way you position things, Julie, is so just beautiful.
Lovely indeed. Well, thanks, Shannyn. It's been so delightful. It's been great to catch up with you for the long time before we actually started recording. That's been lovely as well.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for doing lunch with me. I still owe you a lunch, as it turns out. So I was
That's right. Oh my God. Yes.
I'm like the worst.
I'll have to free myself from the pet sitting over in Mulgrave. The dog and the bird are healing, so that will finish at some point. The healing will have concluded and completed. Then I'll be free again.
Well, in the meantime, you have a wonderful, wonderful few days between chats.
Thank you. You too.
Listeners, we will see you and hear you soon.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for paying attention. Thanks for coming on board.
I stayed awake. It's such a win.
Thanks, Shannyn. See you next time.
Bye.